some time to set it up, and we are still in this process. So this is a project that is funded by the British Academy and Leverhulme Trust, and it has some research purposes, but it has many aspects of community engagement. So the main aims are to use plants as a pretext a bit to think about the legacies of colonization in various places, but in particular in the city of Bath, where I work at the University of Bath. And another aim is to connect various legacies and various types of learning, and so use our artistic side or creativity to engage with plants and the meaning of plants, which is very culturally so very much impacted by our cultural and historical heritage. So we see plants in a certain way, and this way is very much influenced by art. So we have art collections which are resulting from colonization, and we have plants around us in our very beautiful lavish parks that we have in Bath, which also are displaced, and so much of this displacement has been caused by colonization. So the project aims to look at 4 different things. So it has like 4 word packages, and these are walks. So we are planning to run some walks where we would like to have people from various communities to join us and open up conversations about plants. So we have Richard here, who is already running such walks, and who has used a lot in very inspiring ways the technique that he uses or he calls walking with, and I would like to give him the opportunity to present this shortly. And I will just introduce very quickly the other work packages. So another work package is a work that I'm trying to do. So this is the research part of the project, which is an exploration of another city of Bath, which is in the southeast of Jamaica. So I'm going to go there in this May and June, and I will try to connect with people and look at the legacies of Bath in England and Bath in Jamaica. Then we also have a talk series which would try to share knowledge about plants. So there is this sad truth about botanical knowledges today, that they are very much impacted by Eurocentrism, and the way botanical knowledge has evolved is very much connected to the fact that we consider some people more legitimate producers of knowledge than other people, but knowledge and expertise about plants comes in very many different shapes, and we would like to do some sort of knowledge exchange, and some of this will happen at the Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution in form of a talk series, probably once a month. So we are still setting this up, and there will be a website that will give some information about this, which is also still setting up. And finally, so there will be some art workshops, which will be a bit like this one, but not necessarily all online. So we hope for the good weather to start, and us to gather in parks and places where we can engage with plants and work about them through art. So I have some thoughts about this, and I looked at various places in Bath, and I will take you through this, but I think that it's maybe the best to let Richard talk first, since he has to leave, and obviously he will be probably more chilled after he has spoken. So I would hand it over to Richard White, who is lecturer at the University Bath Spa, but he's also an artist, and probably mainly an artist, but he also teaches at Bath Spa, probably he would say.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Yeah, the Bath Spa bit is pays the bills. So if you can let me have the screen back, I'll share a
Yeah,
screen.
how do I, so I unshare,
Yeah.
and so you can.
So hopefully. Hopefully everybody can see there's a picture of the wonderful giant sequoia in Sydney Gardens. So great, thank you. I just wanted to kind of, it's a bit of a scene setter, I guess, really. So for me, first of all, you mentioned walking with as an approach. It's entirely not original. But I've come across other people around the world who I guess are using walking as a way of finding out and exploring and understanding and developing new understandings, using a practice called walking with. And essentially it's about walking and asking questions taken in the very broadest sense, like asking a question of, what does it feel like? What does it sound like? Who am I in this place? As much as it's asking the questions, I suppose, that got me started, which is, who paid for it, and that kind of thing. So to begin with contextualizing myself, part of the walking with approach asks us to do homework, and that homework means thinking about who we are and where we are and where we stand and who we're speaking as. So in this context, I am a white man who once lived in Bath, don't live in Bath any longer, and I grew up in the southwest of England, and my education was very much an education in, I guess, white supremacy and the wonders of the British Empire and all of that. And really only very recently have I started to kind of seriously kind of unpick that, both in terms of the atrocities that, in a sense, committed in my name, but also the consequences of that, and all the that knowledge, which perhaps has not been necessarily erased, but certainly has seemed to be not particularly important, that I've not had access to. See, there's 4 people trying to get in here. I'll just let them in. So the work that I was doing in Sydney Gardens over the past few years has really kind of been an exploration in that. So I came into it thinking very much in terms of the work that I'd previously been doing, which was around what I described as sensing legacies of slave ownership. So more than just kind of pointing to a building, but actually really trying to kind of take that more than just an intellectual bit of heritage knowledge, and trying to sort of, so what does it mean to me? How does that feel? And how does that feel to people that I'm walking with? And how can we kind of, in a sense, come to embody that kind of questioning and that knowledge? And then coming into Sydney Gardens, where, a whole series of walks, series of kind of commissions, massively interrupted by the virus. But what it did was, it partly in a sense because of the virus, it got me perhaps to doing a bit more book stuff than I might have otherwise have done. But it really got me into sort of thinking deeply about this whole thing of botany and the names of plants, and how they carry a certain kind of knowledge. So they carry a knowledge of, it's all Latin. There's a particular kind of way of arranging the words that tell you particular things if you know the code. But when you start then looking at botany and Botany Bay, I kind of had those in my head simultaneously, and you start to then think about how that connects out to the rest of the world, and are starting to think about the way in which some plants become part of this sort of living cabinet of curiosities that the wealthy were trying to create for themselves, and then starting to think about, well, where did that money come from? And, you know, it doesn't take you very long before you're back into that cycle of slave ownership. You're back into that cycle of empire and conquest and extraction. And then thinking about these are living things. These are not just a sort of an object there, and coming close to them and touching them and feeling them, noises that they make when you kind of knock against them, and imagining the kind of the what those plants have kind of experienced. Took me in all kinds of different directions, and that worked out as a series of walks, which I hosted at Sydney Gardens, within the park, and then kind of going out the park and starting to sort of head off into thinking about some of the stories of the looting of India, taken out into some of the stories of the sort of the spectacle that Sydney Gardens was a part of. And so I'm going to just, that's a great long story. I'm still kind of trying to write it up properly. Some of you seeing the names here, some of you took part in the walks, and it kind of finished up. We did this tree weekender back in November, where I've been more and more working with sound. I've had a long collaboration with a sound artist and composer, Joseph Harris, who really took me into some directions that I hadn't even thought about in terms of both storytelling and kind of space making using sound. I've been working with sound using just separate Bluetooth speakers as a way of kind of creating a bit of space, a bit of kind of a space that's held by the sound, using again different sounds, some music, some sampled sounds, that kind of thing. And for that weekend, I got hold of a set of silent DJ equipment and put all the sound that I've been using on those external speakers into this, and it opened up a whole another way of working, which I'm hoping to kind of continue doing. But it takes you into a space of being able to kind of whisper and talk gently with people that I'm walking with. And so those questions become not those kind of big rhetorical political questions, but they can become much softer and more gentle and more, as I said, intimate. You can drop a thought in somebody's head. I'd love to get it so that we can get it working backwards, but those conversations tended to happen kind of afterwards. Well, I've got some very interesting sound there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a bit of a sample. So I'll describe the piece. It's a too long a piece to take up a lot of space here. But what Joseph and I worked on was trying to get really close inside the story of the sequoia. And as I said, I was interested in the way in which the names of trees. Oh, do you think you could mute whoever's got their microphone on? It's really...
Yes. So, I think somebody asked for the live transcriptions to be on, and they are on now. And I think that there may be some people in the waiting room. Okay.
Thanks, Christina. So just very, very briefly, because we won't get to the end of the piece, but I hope you could choose to go off and kind of listen to it. But I was really interested in the way that trees or plants kind of there's this bit of knowledge which is kind of contained within the name of the tree, and far more perhaps that's kind of beyond that. And most of the trees, most of the plants that have kind of been extracted from colonial countries, the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, the knowledge of the tree, the relationship between people and tree and place, and all of that kind of stuff is simply lost. The colonists were not interested in that kind of knowledge at all. And sometimes some of that knowledge kind of survives. So almost by accident, some of that knowledge kind of comes through. And so there's a debate about whether Sequoia, this was intentional or not, but it doesn't really matter because it's celebrated there. So Sequoia was a teacher in the American First Nations, American Indians, and one of the things that he brought was he developed was a way of writing down the language of that particular nation, and it became big. The newspapers that were published in using that kind of script. So the kind of that name carries on. In fact, it's a Johnny Cash song that tells this story about talking leaves, and there is a story of how this plant came to be popular, and then there's a story which takes us to its place where it's growing currently in Sydney Gardens, which in a bizarre way kind of takes it full circle. So where it's growing in Sydney Gardens, it's fairly likely that it was part of the landscaping that was put in after the Great Western Railway, sort of the land, great kind of scar that was cut through Sydney Gardens for the Great Western Railway to come through. And of course, the Great Western Railway was a major source or a focus of investment for the slave owners who'd had the big payout in the late 1830s, the government payout of £20 million, and a lot of investment went into the Great Western Railway. So there's a kind of, just in that one tree, all the questions that I'm attempting to kind of explore around botany, empire and deep time are bound up in that. And through this sound piece, Joseph and I tried to tell some of it and to open up some of the questions. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it. It's the sound quality won't be very good because it's kind of being bounced through my room here. The link to the piece is up on the screen here, and I'll post that up in the chat once we're done. And so I just if you've got headphones on, stick your headphones on. I'm just going to play a few minutes of that, and then I'll take you out of it at the end.
Alongside the railway, an enormous tree towers above us, pushing up vertically into the sky as the railway line stretches horizontally under the bridges and away into the distance.
And this part means like south.
Coming close. Touch the bark.
Like conscious effort on the.
Try to put your arms around the tree.
Okay, I don't know quite what happened there, folks. That's lost the
sound.
It's lost the file completely. So look, I'm going to post the link into the chat, and it's probably far better listening to it more intimately rather than in this kind of context. And I encourage you to go to Sydney Gardens and get the file onto your phone and listen to it, or listen to it straight off of SoundCloud. The piece is intended to partly tell a story, but partly get you to have that experience that for me, looking at this picture of the bark of the tree is kind of, I just want to touch it, you know. So, you know, it's about kind of discovering another kind of knowledge, and enjoying and exploring that knowledge that comes through listening and through touching. And I have further opportunities to do so. Back to you, Christina. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So thank you so much, Richard. I would encourage everybody to use the chat. I think that most of you are muted, so we will open to discussion after, but I have a few things to present, and then I will hand it over to Ben, who is trying to do some live painting. So this is supposed to be a workshop, so we try to give you ideas, but we are hoping that you are going to draw or create something while listening, and or you can also do this afterwards. And we have a Padlet that we shared with everybody. So it has a password, which is Botanical 2020. And so you can also post any artwork that you produce while we are here, or you can also do it afterwards. And the idea is that we would do a live projection of this from a flat, which happens to be my flat in Bath, to the wall of the facade of the 4480 gallery. So whether you are in Bath or anywhere else on the planet, feel free to send us artwork inspired by this conversation, or by, like, maybe you are already creating artwork anyway, and you can use that. So I am trying to head back to my slides. I can't find right now. I have some screens open, probably a bit too many. So this is not it here. Sorry, I'm not a very technologically able person. Unfortunately. Oh, here I am. Okay, so I'm back. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I, like Richard, I also went to Sydney Gardens, and I went to many different other places in Bath and looked for plant motifs, and they are really everywhere in Bath and elsewhere as well. So wherever I went, and so since I live between Bath and London, I went to the British Museum yesterday, and I went to Brixton Market today for to look at plants. And these are some motifs of plants that I picked up from Bath Abbey. So there are some oak leaves, but next to it there is a very Mediterranean, or actually North African and South African plant originally, which is the pomegranate. So it really inspired me, and I tried to look at it. So this is some metalwork that you can find in Bath Abbey. So it really recreates the pomegranate tree, but also the fruit itself. So it is not just a representation of the physical shape of the fruit, although it is really a very beautiful representation of that as well. But I guess that this is in the church because it has symbolic meanings. And so I looked at the various symbolic meanings of the pomegranate from the antiquity, where it figures in Greek mythology, for example, Persephone, who enters Hades, cannot return home after she was kidnapped, because she takes no other food but a piece of a grain of pomegranate, and the pomegranate is also a symbol in the Jewish mythology, and also in many other, like Armenian, for example, and in many cultures it represents prosperity and fertility for the many seeds, I suppose. So these are some pomegranates, and so I tried to dissecate it and create some drawings. So I painted it and collaged it. So I played with the shape and what kind of meanings we can think into it. And I also went inside the Holborn Museum, where I found some very beautiful china plates which represented plant motifs, and there again there was some pomegranate, and then there were some other plants as well. And generally in this museum you find a very impressive collection of china that has many plant motifs, including flowers and fruits. But if we think about the teacup and this china, which were designed for as luxury good for the consumption of some luxurious and fashionable drinks of the time, we find here examples of the consumption of tea and coffee and sugar, and these are very emblematic colonial products. So their consumption, which is still with us, so there is a proof because I had this coffee just last week. So it has changed a bit. The shape is a bit less decorated, and it's maybe a bit more simple, but the drink is still coffee that doesn't grow in Europe normally. So I looked at so in a previous workshop, if you worked with us already in 2019, before COVID came and disrupted things, we had a decolonizing workshop in Bath, where we looked at the city's history and colonial legacies and slavery legacies in the city of Bath. And we played then with the teacup as a motif. And I put some of these images on the Padlet, but not in this presentation, because I tried to not to make it about this previous work. So I also looked in at various artistic representations, and these two books that I'm sharing here are Botanical Art. So both books were published by the Royal Botanical Gardens of Kew. And the one represents how botanical art engages with the evolution of botanical art throughout the golden age of botanical art, which is not surprisingly the age of colonial expansion. So botany was not just an art form and not just a science, but also mainly an enabler of exploitation of plants around the planet and displacement of the planet.
Okay.
And at the same time, I also looked at this other book, Remarkable Plants, which engages with the cultural meaning of plants and how they influenced our world, how they shaped our world. I hear that somebody is trying to speak. I don't know if it's my own echo or is somebody making comments, but please use the chat for that if you could. Okay, so to go further, so I have looked inside this book, the Meaningful Plants, and picked up two plants in particular. So one is corn, and the other one is breadfruit. So breadfruit, I have actually a breadfruit here, which I just bought today. So I don't know how many of you know this plant. So it's spherical. It looks like on the image. This is not a very good one, unfortunately. I didn't buy it. Like I had very short time, and I bought this one because it's very ripe. But there were better ones for drawing, which looked greener and nicer. So this is a fruit that comes from Tahiti, which was brought to the Caribbean, which in the purpose of feeding enslaved people, because it's a very prodigious tree that produces lots of fruits, and that's a cheap and nourishing, very nutritious fruit. Which is also delicious, but apparently it was not very popular, and enslaved people refused to eat it until lately. So it is after emancipation that it actually became a staple, and is a staple for on certain islands. So I saw some growing on Martinique, and I know that it is also available in Jamaica, among other places. And so that takes us to some more other representations. So I'm a keen visitor of Kew Gardens, where there is also a great example of botanical art, which is the Marian North collection, where I picked some images which are very beautiful and very colorful, and somehow they really represent landscapes and plants, both with many botanical details, but at the same time in a very exotizing way. So that made me think about how else we can represent plants. And we went yesterday to the British Museum, where I looked at other objects and not that much paintings, but more artifacts that have been created in various cultural sites. So there is this cotton cloth, which was printed with cashew nut motifs. It comes from Mozambique. It was created around 2003. So it is part of the British Museum's collection. So this is another way of looking at a fruit that we consider as exotic. I actually only saw the first cashew nut in this form, like the real fruit, in Brazil, maybe 2 years ago. And there is here the King's blanket. So it's a wool blanket created in 2011, also in the British Museum, which represents maize. And I think that if we compare this maize with this one, we see that the aim of representing the corn is different. So it is completely abstract, and it is very beautiful. And apparently these blankets were used in the film Black Panther for the clothing of the border tribe, if you are a fan of Great Black Panther movie. And then another representation here from the aloe plant that comes from Uganda. So I copied here. This was apparently a co-creation project that was, so the object was designed in collaboration between various British and African universities and women who practice some crafts in groups in Uganda. And the work was about health concerns, in particular HIV. And as we know, aloe is a healing plant that is very useful, for example, if you have a burn injury. So it can be put on the skin and heals you very well. So another museum I ventured into in Bath is the #1 Royal Crescent, which, if you are from Bath and you know the museum, is a Georgian townhouse that represents a Georgian home. And it has some emblematic objects inside. So there is a curiosity cabinet, and there is a tea cupboard which had a key to it because tea was so expensive that they didn't want the house servants to pick from the tea. And there is a very lavishly put table with lots of sugar-coated cakes and sweets, which represents the consumption of the elite at the time, which is very influenced by colonial products, including sugar. And so I looked at some other objects inside, and I also found some botanical drawings. So this art form is very similar to what I have already shown a bit earlier. So I also looked at the sugar, and at Borough Market this weekend, I found a place where they sell cane juice, about £7 cane juice. And so you have here in the middle a representation from botanical art of the cane, and I also have some cane here. So this is cane. And I think that I'm slowly reaching the end of this. So I have some more market images. So cassava here, which is some of I don't know, a plant that I am really in love with, and some more African aubergine and peppers and okra. So some plants that we consider exotic. And then just to show you how this exoticism can be a concept that it depends where our standpoint is, what we find exotic. I went this weekend to see Small Island by Andrea Levy in the National Theatre. I went for the second time because I liked it so much. And there is a moment in the play the main character, one of the main characters, Hortense, who trains to become a school teacher, teaches an older lady who is the caretaker of the house something she learned at school, and so she teaches her a poem by Wordsworth about the daffodils, and the daffodil is totally exotic for them. So I just this really struck me, because daffodils are everywhere. We are just in season. And so there is this extract from the novel. So she looked to me for all her knowledge of England. I taught her a poem by Mr. William Wordsworth that I had learned to recite at school. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats in higher over vales and hills, when at once I saw a crowd of a host of golden daffodils. Even though she asked, where you see named daffodil, and did not stop fussing until I had drawn the flower in the dirt, she learned every word.
Control.
So I think that I'm going to
Balance and energies.
I'm going to end this with an image of a tree in a park in Bath. So this is a tree that fell with one of the latest storms, Eunice. I really felt very touched by this, and I always wonder how people feel when a neighborhood tree disappears, or like a tree that we are familiar with dies and falls. And this was, I always wonder how maybe we don't know where to plant these trees or how to properly plant these trees. We had this conversation with Richard a couple of weeks ago, that these trees stand lowly and maybe they are more exposed to the wind than they should be, or somehow there were several of these trees that are exogenous in Britain that fell or were broken by these storms, and maybe that also raises the question of climate change and how we contributed, how this colonial displacement of plants and the rise of monocultures led to the disappearance of some plants or big monocultures that can actually cause climate change. And so I would like now to hand it over to some other people. So we started gathering some artworks, and these were produced by my colleague Ben van Praag, who is here with us and who will speak now a little bit about painting plants, and he promised that he will actually do some painting while speaking.
Had become important.
So I guess that I will have to stop screen sharing for that.
Okay. Hi, Christina. Hi, everyone.
Ben?
I'm Ben. I don't know if...
Yes, you are a co-host, so you would be able to normally...
Yeah, do I need to be spotlighted or something so that everybody...
Oh, okay, yes. How could we do that? I think that, oh no, this is to mute you, which is not what I want. Yeah, you don't want to share your screen, you want to be visible, but I think that we have to pin it to you on our own.
Right, yes, so people want to...
So if you are in the view, I guess there is... So I think that this is it. So in the right corner, you have view, and then you can click on speaker.
Yeah.
If I click on speaker, I only see you.
Okay, good. Well, I don't know if that's good or not. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Ben. I'm an artist, pretty much in the same realm as Richard. I'm a lecturer at Bath Spa University, and I'm also an artist who's been a graffiti artist. So my medium is spray paint and ink. And I thought today I would tell you a story about me and a plant that kind of I feel represents me. So I will change my screen so you can see what I'm doing. Christina, if you can just tell me if that's a good
Yes,
view.
I think so. I see your hands and I see your canvas or paper, whatever that is, colorful background.
I've never really done this before, talking while I draw or paint, so I hope it goes well. So when I was about 6 years old, my father got posted to Australia, and I spent much of my young life living and growing up in Australia, in Brisbane, so a very sort of tropical place. And we had a balcony, big balcony, and underneath the balcony was a giant cheese plant. Probably you guys know it as a Monstera
Deliciosa.
Deliciosa, thank you.
I have one just here.
And so also known as a cheese plant, or also known as a Mexican bread plant. And as you all know, Australia is not the safest place for going and playing underneath balconies. So my parents told us that there was a man living under there called the cheese plant monster, and we were terrified of this this cheese plant guy, this figure that we was really there to keep us away from snakes and spiders and things like that. So yeah, so since then I've kind of had this I guess almost an obsession with the cheese plant, and yeah, it's a really interesting plant actually. It's native to tropical Central America, and it's has a lot of it grows a fruit, also known as a breadfruit sometimes, but different from the one that Christina showed you.
Yeah, yes, it has actually the same kind of pattern. It has like little hexagons.
Yes.
On the skin, which you can peel off, but only if it's really ripe. I found some ripe ones some time ago in Madeira.
If you don't wait until it's ripe, it's actually toxic.
Oh.
It contains a toxin that irritates your throat and skin. So the latex actually in the plant itself can irritate your skin and be quite dangerous for you, I believe. The holes in the leaves, which give it its name, the cheese plant, like the Swiss cheese, actually are part of the plant's survival mechanism. It grows in the rainforest, and the holes in the leaves are actually there to let extra light through, because it needs as much light as it can under the canopy. And so the holes in the leaves are designed to maximize the amount of photosynthesis that the plant can achieve through the canopy.
Their questions and gone into the other room to make a decision, that we then open the floor. And anybody who's got any questions for any of the candidates, we can have a general discussion, and then the judges can come back and tell us who the winner is. And the winner will progress to the national final, which is on the 4th of May. Hopefully in person in the Armors Hall.
I'm not sure what that
I
is.
don't know who is doing this talking time to time, but
yeah, I think it's an interference from another meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's anyone in our in our crowd. I think it's something else. So
yeah,
the plants also it has other interesting survival mechanisms. If it has too much water, the plant actually cries. I know those of you that have this plant at home as a house plant, you might see little tears at the end of each leaf point, but that's just its way of kind of sweating or getting rid of
the
extra moisture.
Well, I have one, and ours have never cried any tears, so probably no extra.
Yeah, maybe you need to water it more, Christina. They can get 20 meters high.
Yeah, I saw some in Brazil that climb up buildings to several story high.
Yeah, they're yeah, I saw one actually in the south of England in a big greenhouse that was about 10 meters high. That's probably the biggest one I've seen outside of Brazil. They're kind of surviving as a semi-invasive species in lots of tropical countries. The Mexican word where they originate, and I'm going to not pronounce this very well probably, is piñanona. So I don't know if what that really means, and I think that's part of what Richard was talking about earlier, that the names of these plants and things.
And what is that you are doing there right now?
So now I'm just painting. So I like to paint like silhouettes.
Yeah, but I mean that looks like a little leaf, but it is not. Or is it?
It's a new leaf.
A forming leaf.
Yeah, that they form. So, and yeah, I'm painting, and I normally work at a much bigger scale. So this is happening quite. I had to reduce the size of my painting to fit on the screen, actually, but so it's happening quite quickly.
Yeah, so I'm reading for you because I guess that you're not reading the chat, but we just had this comment: cheese plant love computers. I have 3 of them, 2 near my computers, and it is growing really big, and the other one away was really skinny.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of varieties of them. Some of them can be really expensive, like the variegated ones. They're kind of really in fashion at the moment. So you see a lot of prints, a lot of artwork. They used a lot in popular culture. Like I said, to me, it had this kind of frightening story behind it growing up, but now I love them.
Yeah. Shall we open this to conversations? Because I think while we are watching you painting, maybe people would like to chip in and tell stories that they have about plants.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to unmute and speak about plants, that's a good time now.
Well, I'll chuck something in to stir it up a little bit. What amazes me is how these little bits of knowledge that are kind of caught up in the naming of plants kind of translate and how they kind of inveigle their way into our lives. So again, this is a Sydney Garden story. So I've been working on an installation that will hopefully at some point in the future take place up in the Lake District, and it's a great long story, but is essentially it's to do with Jewish refugees, Jewish child refugees. And so there's a plant that some of you may know called a wandering Jew, and we made lots and lots of, it's very easy to propagate. So wandering Jew as a title for a plant is slightly problematic to start off with, and there's a good kind of conversation to be had about that. But then when you find out what its real name is, or what not its real name, what its scientific name, its botanical, Western European botanical name is, it kind of then opens out still further. So its botanical name is Tradescantia. And that takes you into the whole story if you ask the question, well, why is it called Tradescantia? Because these people, you know, that they thought that they were, you know, the idea that Linnaeus, who kind of kicked this one off, trying to recreate the Garden of Eden in Sweden by collecting all these plants from all over the world and obviously giving them names according to his system. And so one of the earliest Western European British botanists was these two guys called Tradescants, and they were investors in the Virginia plantation, which was the first plantation to have a kind of a legal status for enslaved people. It was the first plantation to actually import captured and enslaved people. And so for me, you just ask the question, why is it called Tradescants? Who was Tradescants? And there you are. You may have one of these growing on your windowsill at this very moment. And in that strange kind of way, it embodies that knowledge. And it's kind of sitting there as a little kind of ticking away, waiting for you to ask that question. What other plants are there out there that their names contain those little bombs of knowledge?
Okay, so as Ben is progressing, I wonder if anyone else wants to chip in. And I see that George Felix is with us. Are you? Hi.
Hi. Yes, I am here.
So George is an ethnobotanist who is still currently in. Are you still in Puerto Rico?
No, I'm in London at the moment.
Oh. Okay, so welcome back.
Thank you.
So do you have any
Sure.
plans, like any favorite?
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to share, I do research on food and farming systems in general. So plants are part of my daily bread, if you wish. I'm French Puerto Rican and I'm based in the UK now. I teach at Coventry University. And as a Caribbean person with some European legacy, well, I have like, you know, identity issues, no? Like I'm from both places and I'm from nowhere, but I'm from all over at the same time. So that's a funny thing to embody and to actually live with. And once you accept that you are multiple persons or multiple identities, then, you know, life becomes easier because then you just navigate through these different cultures. So as a Caribbean person, I have a few plant favorites and I actually travel with them. I'm going to show you one of them at the moment. Before I show you a plant, please don't tell anybody I've trafficked any plants anywhere. But these have been transported from my own garden in Puerto Rico, where I'm native from, and I've brought them to Netherlands. I've brought them to France, and now I guess they're making their way into London. And my favorite plant, it's a medicinal plant. It's called the broadleaf thyme in Spanish, which is my father tongue. French is my mother tongue. in Spanish, we call it oregano brujo, which means witch's oregano, no? Brujo means witchcraft, brujeria. And we call it oregano brujo. It's like it smells like an oregano. It's the same family as mint, oregano, the Lamiaceae, and it's a highly aromatic. So even just by touching it, you can smell this minty flavor. We call it oregano brujo. There's a scientific name. I have to find it to get it for you. This is a medicinal plant. It's reproduced, how you say, not sexually, but asexually. So it's like a clone. I cut a piece and I put it in water for a little while. It makes roots and then it goes in the ground. It grows abundantly. It's a plant that we use for cooking mainly, and also for medicine. And it's a very important one in the Caribbean. I've seen it in Haiti, in Cuba, in Martinique, and Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, of course. We use it a lot. Specifically, we use it in a sauce. We make a sauce to make our beans that is called sofrito. So we mix oregano brujo with some other plants, garlic, some onion, some oil, and we use that to flavor our food. It's not only flavor, so it's also medicine, you know. I use it as tea for pulmonary, you know, when you have like your lungs are a bit clogged, you can use this for tea. And I also use it as a mosquito repellent. So I put some of these leaves in some olive oil and some other essential oils when I have them available. And it's a great repellent, organic and quite handy and very economic when you have the knowledge. So this said, the use of plants is not only the physical possession, you know, like the physical, I don't know if possession is the right word, but like you grab them in your hand, like physically. You also have to know what to do with them, and this knowledge doesn't come from the universe. It comes from other human beings that give you their legacy of knowledge. So this is having a plant is also a transfer. So every time I share one of these clones with a friend, I tell them the whole story. You know, this plant comes from my garden. It's medicinal. I use it for this and that, and now you have it as well, and you are worthy of keeping this legacy alive. So this is my plant, oregano brujo, or broadleaf thyme. I think they call it here in England. And so that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, I also, apart from being a scientist, I'm a recent. It's called, what's its scientific name? Skies? Is that the? Let me finish my thing here, and I will look for the scientific name. I'll give it to you in a few minutes. I was saying that apart from being a scientist, I'm also amateur artist. I've been painting watercolors since a year and a half or 2 years now, and I just wanted to share maybe some things. So I've been painting this while I've heard you speaking because I was inspired. This is the
one man.
It's the face of a semi, and it's a particular semi. Semis are the sort of representations of or divinities for indigenous cultures, especially the Taínos in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. Normally, they are represented by a mountain, which is like this. It's a little mountain, so it represents powers of nature. And this one in particular, it's a little statue. It's a little man, which I have painted here with some more colors you might want to look at it. Normally it's a statue, it's a wooden statue, mm-hmm. And it represents Cohoba, and Cohoba is one of the most important ceremonies for our Taino cultures, where only witches and say medicine man and the chiefs would have access to some psychedelic potion, no? Like some psychedelic form of powder, which was inhaled only by these two categories of persons in the tribe. And,
I noticed that these things are sometimes now offered to tourists. So there are like experiences in Mexico or Brazil you can buy through Airbnb for not
this one. This one is like undercover knowledge. Like nobody really knows what the exact mixture is. What we do know is that this powder was based from the seeds of a plant, the cohoba, mixed with some conch, limestone from the sea, shredded and then inhaled with a sort of soplete, with a little
like a straw or pipe,
like into the nose. So that would allow chiefs and medicine men to foresee the future and cure, etc. So that's on the one hand, and I also wanted to share some another plant that I've painted recently. This is it looks like a sunflower, but it's in fact a Titonia diversifolia. It's also an overlooked plant. It's quite wild in the tropics. I don't think it's native from the Caribbean, but it's quite widespread. And as an agronomist, I use it a lot because it has several purposes. One of them is to control soil erosion. The other one is for pollination, which is the most evident function, no? The flowers for pollinators, etc. And another aspect is food for the animals, no? Feed for the animals. Mm-hmm. So it's an important way of reducing external inputs on the farm, and by using this plant in smart designs, we can achieve some agroecological systems that are not dependent on external inputs. So that's a really nice one as well. So that's it for now. I have much more to say, but I will stop now.
Well, stay with us, and maybe there will be questions, or we
Definitely
can get. So I focused on you. I need to get back to see what Ben is doing. So in the meantime, I have been painting as well. So I have lots of fruits around me. So I had a pineapple here, and I also painted some small bananas, which was so these come from Brixton. Bought them today, and I kind of think that banana is also like a fetish plant for me, or it's not my favorite fruit as we can purchase. So this is the standard banana, and these are these small bananas that you can find in many places like Brazil. And I think that, so I grew up in then communist Hungary, and bananas were, you could find bananas once a year just before Christmas, and that was somehow limited for families. You could only have one for like one kilo for a family, because they were imported just before Christmas, and they wanted as many people as possible to have them. And I was really amazed when I discovered that there are so many types of bananas and plantains, and each of them can be used for different thing. And I just really don't know why we don't have them here. So why there is just the one type that you can find in the UK. So I think biodiversity is really key, and it would be great to have more types of corn and more types of bananas, and more not reducing diversity but increasing. So is there anybody drawing or doing something, wanting to share some artwork or any thoughts?
I'm just peeling off the tape now.
Yeah, looks good.
It's not quite dry, but it'll do.
Don't damage it.
Yeah, I can always do another one.
Yeah.
Ta-da! Can you see? There you go.
So there is a question from Rob Colin, and I think that George, maybe you can answer this. Are there plants, crops taken to the Americas during the colonial period, right? Like breadfruit, which after the colonial period have been set aside by the, sorry, I just can't see the end.
Maybe I can give some element of answer to that. Yeah, so what other plants can we think of that have been taken during the colonial period? Not breadfruit, cassava was native, tobacco was native, corn was native. So I'm trying to make a list of what could have been introduced.
I think that there were things introduced from Europe, actually, like kitchen plants, like some sort of basil and aromatic plants, also by the religious orders that were growing these, but I'm not sure.
Sugarcane was introduced as a cash crop, so that's what came to my mind. No, like food is food, so even if it's imported, it's valuable for its nutritious and cultural legacy.
Yes, sugarcane and mango. I think sugarcane and mango. They were from Asia and they came to.
Yeah, you're right. But I'm thinking of sugarcane. Like, for example, sugarcane keeps on being grown in many places of the tropics in America, but has stopped being grown as a cash crop for economic or political reasons. So nothing to do with like the colonial legacy itself, but more like an economic shift. That's what I wanted to contribute. And there may be some other examples like that, but I'm not aware of because of their colonial legacy as such and refuse to be grown.
Yeah, great painting, Ben. Anyone else wants to share? I think Simba appeared for a second and then disappeared. So would you like to show or?
Oh, actually, I've just been taking notes. So I haven't actually done any art. I've just been taking notes, but I might be interrupted quite often because my toddler is very lively and she's very excited to get involved. But anyhow, interesting story about the Monstera plant. When I was about 7, my parents had one in the garden and they had cut it down, and I was little and I wanted to play, and I just saw it and I started playing in it. And it was around the time of year, which was summer, around early August, and it was the day before our big festival, which is called Crop Over. And Crop Over is a festival that is linked to slavery at the end of basically the crop. There's lots to the history, but at the end of the crop, the slaves, the enslaved people were allowed to, I guess, have a few days off. But either way, back to the Monstera plant, it was that I played in it and my entire skin was itching and terribly itchy for, it must have been at least 2 days. And my parents at the time, embracing the time of year, told me that I had carnival fever. And I genuinely thought that was actually the result of what happened when you got carnival fever because you touched the plant. So that was just a little funny side note on there. In terms of my artwork, I've been more interested in what you've been talking about. I thought there's really good links that have been mentioned within the slideshow, and I've just been taking notes. I haven't done any artwork specifically today, but I do believe you have some of my art on your next slide, Christina. I don't know if you can get it up.
Sorry. There. My next slide.
Sorry, I think the slide that was
it was like after my pictures, I think.
Yes, I stopped there. I can also share through the.
I think it's on the Padlet as well.
It's also on the Padlet, so maybe if I share the Padlet, but
it was basically the work I've been recently interested in has a lot to do with actual botanical drawings.
So this is the Padlet,
and they're tied to colonial.
And these are your 2 images.
Yes.
But there are other images as well. So some from Ben and some from Lucia, who is not here today, who is engaging with her father's botanical collection, whose father was a botanist. So would you like to comment on these?
It's a direction in which my work has been moving towards, which is looking at botanical drawings and actually how it relates to, I guess, to me as a Caribbean person. I'm an artist from Barbados. And obviously being of the Caribbean, my history is deeply tied with, well, the colonial legacy. So it's very, I'm looking at the botanical drawings because they're very beautiful. And like most plants that we pass on a daily basis, people don't necessarily think much deeper than the surface. And with that, basically, with these two pieces, it's just basically contrasting the beauty of an illustration of a plant, but also with the histories that are generally overlooked, but deeply tied to it. So that's where my current line of work is going. Yeah, and that's about all I have to say at the moment.
Shall I unshare?
Yeah, that's great.
Just find. Stop share. Yes, this is interesting because I also noticed that these images are so much with us. And if you go to any furniture store today, you have these framed palm trees. And I wonder how the fact that some of these plants came over as trophy plants, or somehow they were put on display and they were grown in greenhouses, and they were botanical displays of the colonial empires in the mother countries, or the European countries that were building these empires. And somehow I wonder whether this status somehow still stays with these plants, or because they seem so exotic, and maybe that's why we are so keen on having them as home decoration still today. I really wonder why they are so in fashion, or it's maybe because we are consuming some of these plants, and so it is more natural to represent like a coffee plantation inside of a coffee house. I walked by one in Bath lately, not far from the railway station, where there is like a whole botanical wall representing some tropical environment, which is not what you find normally in England. But there are also, lots of palm trees. There are palm trees in our street in London. There are palm trees a bit everywhere. That was, I think, one of the things that struck me most when I arrived to this country, like how comes that there are these tropical plants in England, like I was not expecting, finding so many of them. Yeah, anyone else? My Days with us, who is also an artist. Maybe she would like to speak and make herself visible, or anyone else.
Sorry, my battery's dying, so I won't be able to put a camera on.
Oh, that's okay.
I forgot to charge, yeah. Well, I'm not really sure what to say. A lot has been said, which is very interesting. I was just thinking about like history of plants when I was growing up. As a kid, my grandfather used to, like, when you're bitten by maybe a bee, it was easier to quickly find grass and the green pigment, you just rub it on. So that was quite interesting to know, like, the power of plants. Just doing that and then you get healed quickly. So yeah, that was interesting for me as well. Yeah, and I'm from Zimbabwe.
Yeah, we used vinegar on a bee, being stung on a bee by a bee.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know who else would like to share or speak or show paintings or creative work. Yeah, so I painted this. So these are these mini bananas I was just doing while I was listening, and I think I got some inspiration from Ben. And I'm in the middle of some pineapple, so that looks like this so far.
I did a pineapple too, Christina. Not as good as yours, but it was the first time drawing one. It's interesting to have a go.
It's very nice. On mine is quite ripe, and I have the scent, so it's like very inspiring.
Yeah. I always find pineapples quite interesting because of like how they used to be such an elite symbol. So people used to have them on their like kind of dining tables and things, didn't they? Like kind of I guess probably some of the like colonial families and stuff, the people that had a lot of wealth back in in the Victorian times. But it's also quite interesting, I think, because it's something that did used to be such an elite symbol, but now I guess is kind of accessible to everyone. Like it's quite a cheap fruit to buy now. So I think it's kind of an interesting one to consider.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I wonder, I don't know, we have Rob with us who asked this question earlier about the moving around plants. So Rob is a tourist guide, a blue badge guide, and he is exploring colonial legacies in Bath at the moment. So I wonder if you want to talk about maybe some plants you came across with while doing this exploration, but just if you feel like to.
Yes, hello. You put me on the spot there, Christina. I was just relaxing watching the art. I was told at the age of 11 by my English master at school that I had no sense of creativity in me at all.
Very encouraging education.
Oh yeah, no, it's very good. Yes, different attitude to schooling in those days. People were much more direct, and although it sounds shocking to a lot of people, I accepted that, and I think actually he was right on the button. I don't think I have any creativity in me. I've got a different sort of, or at least my brain operates in probably a fairly pedantic way. So maybe he sowed the seed of that. But in regard to Bath, I've been very keen, having had my eyes opened a little bit in regard to what the academics have said about the subject, and to make me think. As a guide, as I've said a number of times to people, it's been a journey of self-education. So leading tours in Bristol on the Bristol slave trade, and now hopefully this year on Bath's links to the slave economy, in Britain's slave economy in the 18th century. It's been important for me to try and explore not just how I feel, but how other people feel of all different backgrounds, because everyone will have a different take on it. And that's why listening to the academics and coming onto Zoom lectures like this, where you have so many different people who've got their own very, very passionate views about something, allows you to explore the subject at length. So for me, it's about trying to bring our history, British history, to make people aware of that history. And I've got a very different style, as I probably indicated, with the lack of creativity. I don't have an art background or anything like that. And that's why to listen to people who are much more creative in their thought processes, it's been very useful for me. Because one thing I do realize in talking to the academics is that you've got to allow people to have a chance to breathe and to take in history, to understand the lessons. Because if you're going to understand the present, you've got to understand the past and how the past affects the present and will affect the future. And you've got to allow people to breathe, to take it in, to have a discussion. Unfortunately, what happens in Bristol, which is where I live just outside of Bristol, people very much get involved in polarized views, and there's no chance to breathe or to explore how their reaction to history. And that's the difficulty, but the academics allow that, and that's great. So, yeah.
I guess that you give us a lot of credit that I'm not sure that we definitely deserve. I guess that maybe you do a more like, you know, we only get hold of people who come to university or who come to conferences, while you may have access to more diverse audiences and maybe in smaller groups where it may be quite interactive and you may be able to engage people in those conversations which open up, you know, which may actually lead people to review their thoughts and maybe consider other viewpoints that they haven't considered before. So I'm not sure we have these effects.
Well, you've all had that effect on me, and I think it's you provided a safe environment to discuss the subject. You know, if you talk to a lot of people in Bristol, and it's not a safe environment. If you talk to the wrong person, you know, people can get very aggressive very quickly. That's not an environment I want to be able to discuss the subject. I don't expect people to agree with me. I say to people, you know, on the walks, you know, whether you're, for example, Colston's a big subject in Bristol, but whether you're for Colston or against Colston, to me is not important. But I do want people to try and think about the subject, and they can explore it. So it's not about telling people how to think. And that's one thing that I've learned from, for example, Dr. Richard Stone in Bristol. I mean, he said, you know, one thing you try and get to people when he gives his lectures, we're not telling you how to think. We're asking you to think, and that's very different. Yes, so you provide a safe environment, and that's what I like about the whole thing. Because after all, you can't voice an opinion if you know that the person you're going to talk to is very aggressive. So you provide that. So yes, you're extremely well. I couldn't do the guiding without the help from the academics. Is the bottom line. I mean that. The way you talk, the way Richard talks, Benjamin, all of you just allow people to breathe. And
I'm not sure we could do the guiding, Rob.
I'm sure you could. It's just like anything. You know, once you've been given a basis as to, you know, how to guide, you've got to find how your personality is able to convey that to other people. And I can't follow what other people do as guides because they've got a different personality. Richard, what I like about Richard is that he has, and I'm talking about the Richard here, but he has a very different way of exploring the subject. And that's what I like, because you get ideas as to how people react to that, and that's you know that's important. So the academics are useful. Yeah, I'm a shut up, because the trouble is once you start asking me questions as a guy, unfortunately you get involved. But as you realise, I'm not creative, but that's the important thing, and that's why I like listening to all of you.
Yeah, I'm kind of I would like to hear what other people think. It is kind of easier to point to people I know, so I'm quite happy to see Miguel here, who I know one plant he likes is coffee, because he's my colleague and his office in the same corridor, and he makes his little espressos. That's something I know him about. So
I don't really have any stories, Christina, but I was really, when I was listening to, hi Ben, when I was listening to Rob just now, it really made me think that actually it's a really nice positive spin on how we talk about these issues. You know, whether it's through painting, whether talking about stories about plants from our childhood or whatever. I think it's much healthier than the debates that Rob was talking about, which tend to be quite aggressive. And I think I kind of feel like the aggressive way in which some of these issues are talked about it polarizes society, and then the other half of society then talks about the other half being woke as a result, and it's not really a very healthy way to discuss the issues. So I think this is a really, really nice forum in which to discuss stuff like this. I was just interesting because I'm a linguist, so I'm more interested in the language side of things. I was wondering if anyone knows whether there's been any kind of pushback against the use of Latin names for plants or animals, things like that in the world. So I know that, for example, so one of my languages is Chinese. And I know that in China, when they discovered new dinosaurs in the last 10 years or so, they've started to use Chinese names to describe the dinosaurs. So, for example, if a dinosaur is discovered in near the city of Jilin, it'll be called Jilinsaurus. So they've kept the Latin ending, but they've added a Chinese kind of flavor to it. So I was just wondering if there's any kind of pushback, or do we even need to change the way that we name plants and animals?
And I remember that this conversation with Richard, and he mentioned this here a bit, that some plants were renamed. So all the plants were renamed, and we lost knowledge that was somehow included in the name. And yeah, obviously people had to figure out how to grow plants, and that's how also the botanical gardens started in many places, because they were often at the shores, at port cities, so that when they arrived they could take care of the plants and make sure that they stay alive as well as possible. So they did that to ship them and move them around easier. So I'm just reading something from Steph. But Steph, you can also say that yourself. So she says Chinese have, oops, sorry, just disappeared. Oh, sorry, I just have like a very small window for the chat here. Oh, what is the password for the, okay, that's, yeah, just, that was an earlier. Chinese have a money plan that brings you wealth and money. Yes, I have one now. We used to have one in the kitchen and I took a bit of it. So hopefully it will show in my finances shortly. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah, so I finished it. It looks like this now. Thanks.
I was just thinking about, was it Felix? Was that? Yeah, sorry, that Jorge says, with the sugar cane and how that was spread about, and I was thinking about the whole devastation that's come out of that as well, with the introduction of pest control to control things that were damaging the cane in places like Australia. The introduction of the cane toad and what that's done, and so this sort of unfolding sort of legacy of colonization and things, and how it's affected more than people. It's affected our ecosystems and things as well. Sorry, I'm ending on a negative note.
Yeah, I could add to this. I'm just thinking about how some pesticides have been used very aggressively in some places, and how this kind of colonial hierarchy still exist in terms of, for example, in France, there have been quite a few debates about very aggressive pesticides that were used in banana plantations in Martinique and Guadeloupe, where many people have been diagnosed with prostate cancer in particular as an effect of that. And these pesticides have not been used in mainland France. It has only been used there in particular. And I guess it's hard to, it's easy to feel that some citizens do not matter as equally as others. And so they have, I don't know how to put that nicely, but I think that there are some hierarchies that may survive, and some people's health risk is not taken as seriously as other people's, which is also like connecting to the issue that in the same islands there has never been a land reform, and people who own the plantation still own that land currently.
Yeah, and to go beyond with the sugarcane, the toad, I wanted to share my screen to show you an image of the toad and another insect.
Yeah, I have to make you a co-host so that you can do that, and I'm trying to do this now.
Great.
Okay, more. Co-host.
Because the sugarcane, you're right, Ben, in the Caribbean as well, we had the introduction of sugarcane. There was a cane worm, remember, a white worm of some sort. They introduced the cane toad to control that. And actually what happened is that when they introduced an external animal, which is the toad, it had its effect. It was eating the worm, but then the worm was smarter and just leveled up. Instead of being like near the ground, it just went up. And so both organisms were there present. Another situation where there's impact and spread of exotic pests is the coffee borer. And I forgot that this also is an exotic plant for the Caribbean, for the tropical Americas. And it's really widespread, the coffee. And now we have an issue with the coffee borer, which makes like a little caries like in the tooth, but in the coffee bean. And it's reducing the quality of the
coffee
and the quantity of coffee available in the world. And it's actually really devastating because it reproduces very quickly and it's really hard to control. And added to that, to connect with Christina's comment about the pesticides, no? With the coffee borer, there's a lot of pesticides coming in, and particularly one that is really sad to use extensively after, let's say, after the 1960s, 70s with the Green Revolution, is the massive use of herbicides, which, you know, are also cancer producers. And the use of herbicide as a technology is quite amazing because, why, what the hell, like you spray some potion, some powder, and your herbs, your weeds disappear. But on the other hand, it has a twofold problem, no? Environmentally, soil erosion, pollution of the water streams, etc., and cancer creation to cancer inducing to human beings that apply it, and often apply it in conditions that are not safe. No mask, no protection, no anything. And myself, working only with organic farms, I was once sick with herbicide ingestion, and it's really bad. You start vomiting, and that's like the list of the symptoms. So yeah, that's also an issue that comes with exotic plants being traveled. And the thing is that these exotic plants that were introduced in the Americas, so thinking specifically of sugarcane and coffee, are not even food. Like, when you think about them, they're not really food. They're just commodities for the northern markets, no, for the US or for even Europe, for people to have their coffee and the sugar that comes with the coffee. So really that combination, which is a bit sweet and sour.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think that it's also its own revenge in a way, because it it causes, like sugar causes obesity, and cancer feeds on sugar. And I think that it just generally destroys health in many populations worldwide. Okay, so I kind of think that we are maybe reaching the end of this conversation, because it was planned to be an hour and a half. So if anybody has any last thought that you would like to share, maybe this is the time to do it. Go ahead.
The last thought, I was going through my notebooks here, and I just wanted to share 2 images of my home in Puerto Rico with some of the plants that are around. So this is a typical, farmer, and this is not watercolors; it's more like pencils, color pencils. And this is a view from a home garden of a local peasant, where you can see the peasant, looking at his garden and the great diversity of plants. And just a last one, this is a view from my own garden there. And again, in a tropical context, you can have a lot of diversity, which can be true, not necessarily with the same plants, but can be true also in temperate countries, so don't be disappointed. And the one I wanted to point you at is specifically this one, which is a yautía. It's I think there are different names, cocoyam or...
Yes, I know that.
There's some other synonyms, and it's an impressive root crop which has a lot of carbohydrate, pretty much like a potato, underground, and it's actually resistant to hurricanes. So when a hurricane, a storm goes on the Caribbean, one of the few plants where you can feed on are these ones, because the actual food energetic, high energy content is below ground, and it's still there, even though the above ground disappears. And even if it disappears, it will regrow. So that was my final contribution.
That's really great. So if finally we can end on a positive on a positive note. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did, and that we will have more of these exchanges. So the idea is that we will have some talks in Bath, so very likely to be at the BRLSI or Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution, or they now call themselves institution because nobody can pronounce the short form. And that we will do some walks. So we have a walk that Ben and I have been working on for some time, which is now maybe slowly reaching a point where we can roll it out. And so we are designing a map for it, and so it will be a walk on Bath's slavery legacies and some Black presence in Bath. So Rob has been helping us with that, and so was Richard as well. So people are coming together a bit to help us. So it would be great to have you maybe on this event. So please look out for what we are doing. We will be running art workshops and talks. So we would like to have George with us shortly via Zoom or in real or both. We are thinking about doing things with Fairfield House. So we hope to do many different things, and we would just really like to have audiences who engage with this and bring a variety of viewpoints and share views. And so continue these conversations, which are like peaceful conversations, but nevertheless, which help disentangle all these legacies that are with us. So many thanks for all of you, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And George, if you are still in London, I am in London as well. And if I could meet up and you could give me some of the Brujo plant, that would
yes, definitely. Definitely. Let's meet. Yeah, I'll write you a mail.
Okay, great. Hi, Vandana. So finally you show yourself.
Sorry, I've been teaching all day and I was so tired.
Yeah.
I was just relaxing and
have you submitted your thesis?
Yes.
Oh, great. There's something to celebrate.
So sleep deprived. So sleep deprived.
Well done.